A forgotten workshop floor holds the secrets to humanity's first experiments with metal. Recent archaeological discoveries are fundamentally reshaping the entire narrative of early metallurgy. For generations, we believed this technology followed a single, linear path of progress. But newly uncovered workshop remains tell a far more complex and fascinating story. By the end of this journey, your understanding of ancient innovation will be completely transformed. We will explore how a single furnace found in a remote valley could rewrite our timelines, and why master smiths in distant cultures invented the same techniques without ever meeting. What does true ingenuity look like when you strip away all the rules? The dirt in that Balkan Valley floor felt no different from any other. A team of archaeologists, led by a researcher named Ilara, worked their trowels with practiced patience, expecting to find the usual remnants of an ancient settlement. Then a tool scraped against something hard and vitrified, something that was not stone. As they carefully brushed the soil away, the dark, glassy shape of slag emerged, followed by the faint but unmistakable outline of a crude furnace base. The initial assumption was a simple one, a metalworking site from a well-documented period. But the carbon dating results told a different story, a story that was centuries, perhaps even a full millennium, older than anyone had believed possible for that region. Ilara and her team stood at the edge of that pit, looking at a timeline that was suddenly, irrevocably broken. Their first hypothesis, that this was a satellite workshop of a known culture, evaporated. The data was uncompromising. This furnace was not a product of an established metallurgical tradition. It was a precursor, an experiment. It proved that the history of technology is not a set of facts in a book, but a narrative written in layers of earth, waiting for a careful hand to reveal its true and often surprising chapters. This single, humble find was the first thread, and pulling on it would begin to unravel the entire tapestry of early human innovation. That single furnace in the Balkans was not an isolated anomaly. It was a clue pointing toward a far grander, more chaotic truth. For generations, the story of metallurgy was a simple one of diffusion, a single bright spark of invention in one place that slowly spread its light to the rest of the world. But the evidence piling up from ancient workshop floors tells a very different story. It reveals a world where the fire of innovation was lit not once, but many times over in brilliant, isolated flashes. Consider the sophisticated furnace designs of the Vinci culture in Southeast Europe. Their workshops contain ceramic fragments with unique mineral residues, a signature of their own distinct smelting process. Thousands of miles away in the Indus Valley, early metalworkers were achieving similar results, yet their crucibles showed different patterns of soot and heat cracking. They were using a different fuel, a different airflow technique, solving the same fundamental problem with their own localized ingenuity. The proof is etched into the artifacts themselves. Microscopic analysis of tool marks on ore from a Serbian site do not match the styles found in Anatolia. The very way these early smiths struck their hammers was a cultural fingerprint, a testament to independent development. This was not a single, spreading wave of knowledge. It was a chorus of individual voices, each singing the same song of discovery in their own unique key. This paradigm shift forces us to abandon the idea of ancient people as passive recipients of technology. They were active, creative problem solvers. When faced with a colorful rock that behaved unlike any other, they did not wait for a manual from a distant land. They experimented, they failed, and they persevered, building their own pathways to a new age. The crucible of Surdica stands as a powerful testament to this era of decentralized genius. Nestled in a region once known by that ancient name, this workshop's remains were far from ordinary. Its furnaces were not built from the common clay mixtures of the time. Instead, local artisans had perfected a unique recipe, blending specific tempers and local minerals to create a ceramic shell that could withstand a ferocious, sustained heat. This was not an accidental discovery. This was a deliberate, local solution to a universal problem, producing temperatures far higher and more controlled than what was believed achievable in that period. The very walls of these furnaces whisper of an advanced, homegrown understanding of thermal dynamics. The arrangement of the air vents tells a compelling story. They were not simple holes, but carefully angled channels designed to create a specific vortex of air within the chamber. The fuel chamber itself was a distinct, separated unit, indicating a sophisticated grasp of staged combustion. This was not a design imported from a more advanced civilization. It was a brilliant local innovation, a configuration unseen anywhere else in the ancient world. Materials scientists studying the slag samples from Surdica found something even more revealing. Trapped within the glassy waste were microscopic traces of experimental alloys. The smiths were not just purifying copper, they were actively testing it, combining it with various local ores to see what new, stronger metals they could create. Each failed attempt, each strange mixture solidified in the slag, is a record of active, on-the-ground research and development. This micro-level view of a single workshop completely dismantles the old idea of a single teacher and many students. Here in Surdica, we see a community of master innovators working in their own isolated pocket of the world, independently writing their own chapter in the grand story of human technology. Far from the inland furnaces on a wind-swept stretch of ancient coastline, another workshop whispered a different secret. Here, the innovation was not in the fire, but in the force. Archaeologists uncovered not grand smelting furnaces, but a collection of anvils and hammerstones worn smooth by countless impacts. The material itself was the first clue, a type of stone not found anywhere in the local region. These tools had traveled, likely along established trade networks that moved not just goods but specialized knowledge. Someone, long ago, had understood that to shape a new material, you needed the right tools for the job, and they were willing to go to great lengths to acquire them. The wear patterns on these anvils tell a story of immense skill and repetition. They are not pitted and battered from random strikes, but show a consistent, shallow concavity, a perfect cradle for repeatedly hammering a small ingot. The story became clear when researchers found piles of delicate, paper-thin copper sheets nearby, each one remarkably uniform. This was not crude bashing. This was a precise, mastered technique for creating a specific product. This method of sheet metalworking was a technology that historians had previously credited to civilizations 1,000 years in the future. Yet here it was, on this forgotten shore, proving that the pathway of metallurgy was paved with more than just the discovery of smelting. It was also built on the quiet, persistent development of complex forming technologies. The existence of this specialized workshop hints at a level of societal organization we rarely attribute to such early times. It suggests that certain individuals were dedicating their lives not just to making metal, but to perfecting the art of working it, becoming the ancient world's first master sheet metal workers. This coastal site forces us to expand our definition of ancient innovation, to see that the true revolution was as much in the shaping of the metal as it was in its creation. Perhaps the most revolutionary metal of all was not born from a grand design, but from a simple spill. Picture a potter, thousands of years ago, preparing a kiln for a new batch of vessels. The clay used to line the firing pit was not pure. It was rich with green-stained malachite, a common copper ore. The fire roared, temperatures climbed higher than intended, and a remarkable transformation occurred. When the ashes cooled, nestled among the fired pots was a small, strange, reddish bead. It was not ceramic, it was solid, malleable metal, a bead of native copper reduced from the ore in the clay. This was not the result of a targeted experiment. It was a complete accident, a byproduct of a different craft entirely. Yet for a curious mind, that singular, unexpected object would have been a profound mystery, a material that broke all the known rules of stone and clay. That spark of curiosity, ignited by a happy accident, was likely the true beginning of the metallurgical journey for countless cultures. The path was littered with such fortunate mistakes. A smith intending to produce pure copper might repeatedly find that certain batches of ore yielded a harder, more durable metal. The initial reaction would have been frustration at the impurity, the failure to achieve the expected result. Only through use would they realize that this flawed metal, an accidental bronze created by arsenic or tin impurities in the ore, was actually superior. It held an edge longer, it was less brittle, it was a better tool. This was innovation not as a single flash of genius, but as a slow, collective process of observation and adaptation. It humanizes our ancient ancestors, showing us they were not infallible super geniuses, but practical people who learned to recognize a good outcome, even when it arrived completely by surprise. This messy, non-linear journey of trial and error, of embracing the unexpected, leads us directly to the next piece of the puzzle, the very landscape that provided these raw materials and dictated the rules of the game. The landscape itself was a demanding teacher, its lessons written in stone, soil, and forest. The silent, profound truth emerging from these ancient workshops is that metallurgy was never a single science to be exported, but a deeply personal dialogue between a community and its immediate surroundings. A master smith in a dense, old-growth forest possessed a fundamentally different set of tools than their counterpart in a windswept, arid plain. Their innovations were not born in a vacuum, but were direct, ingenious responses to the materials nature provided or deliberately withheld. Consider the challenge of fuel. In a lush, wooded region like the Carpathian Basin, the abundance of hardwood trees offered a seemingly endless supply of high-quality charcoal. This resource wealth allowed for furnace designs that were fuel-intensive, capable of sustaining roaring, high-temperature fires for extended periods. This, in turn, enabled a culture of experimentation, of trial and error with different ores and alloys. They could afford to fail, to run a furnace for a day only to produce a lump of unusable slag, because the forest would provide more fuel tomorrow. Their technological pathway was one of thermal luxury, paved with the charcoal from countless trees. Now, transport that same fundamental knowledge of smelting to an arid region, a place where wood was a precious commodity, carefully managed and sparingly used. Here, the furnace design had to be a masterpiece of efficiency, not just power. The vents and chambers were engineered to squeeze every last degree of heat from a minimal amount of scarce fuel. Smelting events would have been rare, carefully planned ceremonies of fire, where every step was optimized to guarantee success on the first attempt. There was no room for wasteful experimentation. The technological pathway here was one of scarcity and precision, a testament to human ingenuity under constraint. The very rhythm of metal production, its frequency and scale, was conducted by the slow growth of trees in a dry land. This environmental partnership extended beyond just fuel. The specific clay used to line a furnace could make or break the entire operation. A community living atop a deposit of highly refractory clay, a material capable of withstanding extreme heat, had a natural advantage. They could push their furnaces to new thermal limits, Another group, with only access to common river clay, would have to innovate in different ways, perhaps by developing thicker walls or more sophisticated cooling techniques to prevent their furnace from melting itself. The local geology did not just provide the metal, it provided the very crucible for its creation. This intimate connection to place meant that a metallurgical technique perfected in one valley could be completely impractical just over the mountain range, not because of a lack of intelligence, but because the earth itself offered a different set of ingredients. This deep, unbreakable bond between technology and terrain sets the stage for an even more fascinating dimension of the story, one written not in clay or slag, but in the beliefs and rituals of the people who wielded this transformative power. But the fire of the forge did more than transform metal, it reshaped the very fabric of society. The workshop was never just a technical space, it was a bustling social hub, the first true laboratory demanding a level of coordination never before required. This new craft could not be mastered by a lone individual working in isolation. It required a symphony of specialized roles, each dependent on the other. The ore scout possessed an intimate knowledge of the landscape, able to identify the subtle colorations in rock that signaled a rich vein of copper. The charcoal burner, a master of a different kind of fire, tended to slow-burning pits in the forest, transforming wood into the pure carbon fuel essential for the furnace's intense heat. And at the center of it all stood the master smith, the holder of the flame's deepest secrets. This was a shift from individual craft to coordinated labor, a monumental social innovation in its own right. The layout of these workshops provides clear archaeological evidence for this new social structure. At a site in the Italian Alps, excavators found a large, central furnace surrounded by several smaller, simpler hearths. The wear patterns on the tools near these smaller stations suggest repetitive, basic tasks, the kind of work assigned to novices. This physical arrangement strongly implies a master and apprentice system, a structured way of passing down complex, dangerous knowledge from one generation to the next. This specialization inevitably raised a profound question: who controlled the final, brilliant product? In some communities, the evidence suggests metal production fostered deep cooperation. The workshop was a communal asset, its output shared for the benefit of all, strengthening social bonds. The smith was a revered figure, but one embedded within the group. In other places, a different story emerges. Control over the sources of rare tin or over the furnace itself could have created the earliest forms of significant social stratification. The individual or family who commanded the metal commanded power, prestige, and a new kind of influence. This was a potential turning point where the ability to create tools could also create hierarchies, fundamentally altering the economic landscape of these early cultures. A single bead of copper, born from a potter's accidental kiln, held immense local value, but its true potential was unlocked when it began to travel. The story of early metallurgy is not merely one of isolated genius, but also of a vast, ancient conversation conducted along the veins of continental trade. While many innovations were born and perfected in a single valley, the most transformative ideas embarked on incredible journeys. A new type of hammer, a more efficient furnace lining, or a specific method for heating and cooling metal to make it less brittle, a process we now call annealing, could begin its life in one small workshop. From there, it would not travel in a vacuum. It hitched a ride on routes already well established for moving other precious goods, like the glossy black flow of obsidian from volcanic highlands or the shimmer of seashells carried far inland. The trader who bartered for a new kind of axe was not just acquiring a tool, he was absorbing a fragment of the knowledge used to create it. He might not understand the smith's full process, but he could describe the axe's superior quality, its unique color, or the way it was hardened. This fragmented information became a seed, planted in a distant workshop and leading to new rounds of local experimentation and adaptation. The proof of these long-vanished conversations is locked within the metal itself. Modern science can perform a kind of archaeological fingerprinting by analyzing the trace elements and lead isotopes within a copper artifact found hundreds of miles from any known mine. Researchers can match its chemical signature directly to a specific ore deposit. We can now trace a dagger found in a Central European burial back to the exact mountain range in the Balkans where its copper was originally dug from the earth. This is not just proof of trade in finished goods, it is evidence of a knowledge network. It reveals that a community did not need to discover metallurgy on their own to participate in the metal age. They could acquire the raw material or the finished product and through it gain access to the technological concepts of a distant culture. This complex interplay between local invention and long-distance exchange creates a map of innovation that is breathtakingly intricate. It was not a simple tree of knowledge with a single trunk, but a sprawling, interconnected web where a technique perfected in one corner of the world could, over generations, inspire a master smith in another. This web of shared knowledge challenges us to find a new way to picture human progress, not as a series of isolated lights blinking on in the darkness, but as a constellation, each point of brilliance connected to the others by faint but undeniable lines of exchange. These silent artifacts now have a voice, and we are learning to listen. The key to unlocking their stories lies not with a trowel, but with a suite of astonishingly precise scientific instruments. This is the world of the modern archaeometallurgist, where the workshop floor becomes a crime scene for technological history, and every speck of ancient slag is a witness waiting to testify. The primary tool in this new investigation is the portable X-ray fluorescence gun. It looks like something from science fiction, a handheld device that a researcher can point at an artifact without ever touching it. In a matter of seconds, it reveals the object's precise elemental recipe, the exact percentages of copper, tin, arsenic, and other trace elements that make up its metal. This instant analysis can immediately flag an anomaly, like a high level of cobalt that acts as a chemical signature, linking a finished axe head to a specific, forgotten mine hundreds of miles away. But to understand the how, the very techniques of the ancient smith, we must look deeper into the metal's soul. This is where the scanning electron microscope comes in. It allows scientists to peer into the microstructure of a metal sample, magnified thousands of times. They can see the crystalline grain of the copper, the way the atoms arranged themselves as the hot metal cooled. A fast cooling process leaves one kind of pattern, a slow, controlled cooling leaves another. These microscopic landscapes tell us if the smith was quenching the metal in water or letting it anneal slowly in the ashes, revealing a level of technical finesse we never knew they possessed. Perhaps the most powerful tool is isotopic analysis. Think of it as a geological fingerprint. The lead isotopes present in a copper ore are unique to the geological age and location of its parent rock. By matching the isotopic signature in an artifact to a known ore body, we can perform a kind of time-traveling detective work, tracing a lump of metal from a workshop in Germany directly back to its birthplace in a Serbian mountain. This is how we map those ancient knowledge networks with such stunning accuracy. The true power of this scientific toolkit is its gentleness. Most of these techniques are entirely non-destructive. A priceless dagger does not need to be cut apart to be understood. It can be studied, its secrets gently coaxed out without a single scratch, preserving it for future generations. This respectful interrogation of the past is what allows us to finally decode the language of the workshop. we are no longer just guessing at what ancient people might have done. We are reading the direct physical evidence of their actions, the choices they made in the heat of the moment, forever frozen in the metal they left behind. The most honest storytellers in this ancient revolution were not the perfect swords or the polished ceremonial daggers. They were the failures. Scattered around every workshop site, lying in forgotten heaps, are the misshapen lumps, the cracked ingots, and the vast glassy mounds of slag. For decades, these were considered mere garbage, the useless leftovers of the process. Today, we understand they are the exact opposite. They are the laboratory notebooks of the ancient world, each flawed piece a detailed record of a problem encountered and a lesson learned. Take a casting pit where archaeologists unearthed a bizarre, malformed axe head. It is not a tool, it is a fossilized mistake. Its twisted shape tells a clear story of a mold that was not properly vented. As the molten metal poured in, trapped air had nowhere to escape, creating bubbles and voids that ruined the casting. This single failed object is a data point. It proves these metalworkers were using complex, enclosed molds, and it captures the precise moment they discovered a critical flaw in their design. The next axe head from that pit, if they ever found it, would likely show the small, deliberate channels they carved into the mold to solve that very problem. This is the iterative process of innovation, written in bronze and copper. The slag, that blackish, bubbly glass that was once considered waste, is now a treasure trove. Its chemical composition is a permanent record of the smelt. A high percentage of copper metal still trapped within the slag indicates an inefficient furnace, one that failed to get hot enough to fully separate the pure metal from the rocky ore. A different slag, with a very low metal content, speaks of a master smith who had perfected the air flow and temperature, squeezing every last bit of valuable copper from the stone. By reading these slag heaps layer by layer, we can witness the slow, painstaking improvement of a technology over generations. We see the early, wasteful layers followed by progressively more efficient ones, a visible graph of human ingenuity climbing upward. Even the smallest debris tells a story. The tiny flakes of waste metal and stone chipped away during the final shaping of a tool can be reassembled, like a three-dimensional puzzle. This debris, known as debitage, reveals the exact sequence of strikes the smith used. It shows us their technique, whether they were right-handed or left-handed, how they held the workpiece, and where they applied the most pressure. These are the intimate, physical fingerprints of an individual's skill, preserved for millennia. These so-called mistakes collectively paint a profoundly human picture. They show us that progress was not a straight line. It was a path paved with repeated failure, with frustration, and with the quiet determination to try again tomorrow. The legacy of these early metalworkers is not just the metal they succeeded in making, but the immense perseverance they demonstrated in the face of countless setbacks, a resilience we can now finally recognize from the fragments they left behind. The accepted chronology of the Metal Ages is fracturing before our eyes, and the evidence comes from the most mundane of sources, a piece of charcoal. Advanced radiocarbon dating techniques now allow scientists to analyze organic materials found sealed within the foundations of a furnace or pressed into the floor of a workshop with astonishing precision. These tiny, carbonized fragments of wood, once just fuel, have become precise timekeepers. The results are consistently shocking, pushing back the first known use of copper and bronze in region after region by centuries. We once envisioned a neat, sequential timeline, a wave of knowledge rolling slowly from a single point of origin. The new data paints a far more chaotic and exciting picture. Imagine a map of Europe and Western Asia with lights flickering on to indicate the first evidence of metalworking. The old model showed one light turning on, then another much later, followed by another in a slow, deliberate chain. The revised map shows lights igniting almost simultaneously across vast distances in the Balkans, in Iberia, in the British Isles, and in the Indus Valley. The gaps between these flashes of innovation are shrinking dramatically. This was not a slow diffusion of a secret from a master to a student. This was a widespread, nearly simultaneous awakening to a new possibility. This recalibration of time is fundamental, forcing us to completely rethink the pace of ancient innovation. If these discoveries were not passed from one culture to the next in a linear fashion, what triggered this concurrent global awakening? The answer may lie not in human communication, but in the global environment, a period of climatic stability, a shift in weather patterns that made certain ore deposits more accessible, or even the retreat of glaciers revealing new mineral-rich landscapes could have provided the common catalyst. The Earth itself may have handed the same puzzle to disparate cultures at roughly the same time, and in their isolation, they each began to find their own brilliant solutions, forever changing our understanding of how humanity takes its great leaps forward. A harsh, prolonged drought could have been the silent, desperate push that finally ignited the furnace. The old ways, dependent on predictable rains and abundant game, were failing. In such times of profound environmental stress, clinging to tradition becomes a luxury a community can no longer afford. This is where paleoclimatic data, the science of reading ancient weather patterns from ice cores and lakebed sediments, weaves a startling new thread into our story. Researchers are discovering a compelling correlation. The emergence of several major metallurgical centers aligns precisely with periods of significant climatic upheaval, such as regional cooling events or severe, multi-generational droughts. Necessity, it seems, was not just a mother of invention, it was a demanding teacher forcing a final exam. A hunting group, watching their prey vanish and their flint tools break against hardened soil, would have faced a stark choice: innovate or face immense hardship. The strange, malleable metal that once seemed a curiosity now presented itself as a potential solution, a material for creating stronger, more durable tools to till tougher ground, or sharper, more reliable weapons to secure scarce resources. This was innovation born from urgency, a collective decision to gamble on a new, unpredictable technology because the old ways were no longer enough. Yet this desperate turn to the forge was never a purely practical, mechanical act. The act of transforming stone into glowing, liquid metal would have been seen as something deeply powerful, even supernatural. It is no coincidence that the earliest smiths were often shrouded in myth and ritual. They were not just technicians, they were intermediaries who conversed with the earth and commanded the elemental force of fire. The workshop itself became a sacred space, its success dependent on more than just the right mix of ore and charcoal. Ceremonial practices, offerings to appease the spirits of the earth, and specific chants or taboos likely surrounded the smelting process. The master smith held a dual role, a practical problem solver and a spiritual guardian, guiding the community through a technological and a spiritual transformation. This fusion of desperate need and profound belief created the perfect crucible for change. It was not merely about making a better axe, it was about harnessing a mysterious power from the world itself to ensure the community's very survival, a powerful dynamic of human ingenuity rising to meet a global challenge. A small clay figurine of a bull was found carefully placed at the base of an ancient furnace, its snout pointing directly toward the fire. This was no casual discard, it was a deliberate deposit, an offering. Across these early workshop sites, archaeologists consistently uncover such ritual objects, miniature anvils, polished stones, and even the remains of food and drink left beside the smelting pits. The space was clearly more than a factory, it was a temple to a dangerous and miraculous craft. The process itself must have seemed like the deepest form of magic. To take a dull, heavy stone and, through the agency of fire and breath, conjure a glowing, liquid sun from within it was an act of pure transformation. In a world governed by spirits, this was not chemistry, it was alchemy, a negotiation with the very essence of the earth. The master smith, therefore, was far more than a skilled laborer. He was a shaman of the forge, the only one who knew the chants, the rituals, and the precise moments to appease the unseen forces that controlled the success or failure of the smelt. His knowledge was a sacred trust, a blend of practical technique and spiritual protocol. This inseparable fusion of the practical and the divine fundamentally shaped the pathways of innovation. A new furnace design would not be adopted simply because it was more efficient. It had to align with the ritual requirements of the process, perhaps orienting the air vents to face a sacred mountain or using a specific type of wood for charcoal that also held ceremonial significance. The development of metalworking was not a cold, logical progression. It was a dance between the tangible needs of the material and the intangible beliefs of the culture, a dance where every technological step forward was also a spiritual one. This concept extended to the crafts that grew alongside metallurgy. The potter creating a crucible was not just making a container, he was forming a sacred vessel that would hold liquid stone. The designs he painted on its surface might not have been mere decoration, but protective symbols to ensure the metal's successful birth. In this worldview, there was no line between the workshop and the altar, a perspective that challenges our modern separation of science and spirit and reveals the deeply human context in which our oldest technologies were born. The boundary between the potter's clay and the smith's metal was never a solid wall, but a porous and creative frontier. The first individuals to coax metal from stone were not specialized metallurgists. They were master potters whose hands were already deeply familiar with earth, fire, and transformation. Their existing knowledge became the essential blueprint for an entirely new industry. For generations, these artisans had been pushing the limits of their kilns, learning through trial and error which local clays could withstand the most intense heat without cracking. They understood how to control the airflow to achieve a consistent temperature, and they knew the precise moment when a glaze would vitrify into a hard, glossy shell. This was a complete, pre-existing science of pyrotechnology, a ready-made toolkit of skills that could be directly applied to the new challenge of smelting. A potter did not look at a lump of copper ore and see an unsolvable mystery. They saw a new kind of clay that demanded a hotter, more carefully managed fire. The evidence for this seamless transition is etched into the ground at sites across the ancient world. Archaeologists uncover clay-lined pits that show clear, alternating layers of use. In one stratum, the soil is stained with the ochre and red pigments of fired pottery. Directly above it, the same pit lining is vitrified and covered in the distinctive greenish slag of copper smelting. The very same artisans were using the very same infrastructure, first to fire their pots and then to conduct their first audacious experiments with metal. The crucible itself is the most powerful symbol of this shared heritage. It is, in its essence, a specialized pot, a thick-walled ceramic vessel designed for a singular, extreme purpose. The potters who crafted these first crucibles were not inventing a new form from scratch. They were adapting the shapes and ceramic recipes they already knew, reinforcing the walls and altering the temper to create a container that could briefly hold a miniature, man-made sun. The chemical knowledge was just as transferable. A potter familiar with creating colorful glazes by adding metallic ores like copper or manganese to a clay slip would have been the first to notice the strange, metallic bead formed when a bit of that colorful slip fell into the hottest part of the kiln. That accidental discovery, a happy byproduct of their ceramic craft, was the spark that ignited a technological revolution. This cross-pollination of skills demonstrates a fundamental truth about human innovation. Major advances rarely spring from a void. They are almost always built upon a deep foundation of existing, often seemingly unrelated, knowledge. The mastery of one craft provided the mental and practical framework for the next great leap, a legacy of ingenuity passed down through generations of hands that shaped both clay and the future. Scattered across the workshop floor, amidst the master's flawless creations, lie the clumsy, asymmetrical attempts of the novice. These crude practice pieces, often lumps of misshapen metal or sheets of copper hammered too thin and torn at the edges, are the most intimate relics of all. They are the fossilized learning curves of the first engineers, and they reveal a profound shift from individual genius to an institutionalized system of education. The evidence is etched into the tools themselves. At a site in the Italian Alps, archaeologists found a set of hammerstones arranged in a clear progression. One end of the workspace held large, heavy, general-purpose stones, worn from the brute force work of breaking ore. Closer to the main furnace, however, lay a collection of smaller, finer hammers. Their surfaces were polished to a gleam from thousands of precise, controlled strikes, and their handles were grooved to fit the specific grip of a seasoned hand. This was a master's personal toolkit, but beside them were other stones of similar size but made from a softer, less durable material. Their wear patterns were erratic, with deep, off-center gouges instead of smooth polish. These were the training tools given to an apprentice to learn the feel of the hammer without ruining valuable bronze or damaging the master's own finely balanced equipment. This physical gradation of tools, from crude to refined, paints a clear picture of a master guiding a novice through the stages of skill. The knowledge transfer was not merely spoken, it was embodied, passed from one pair of hands to another through the rhythmic language of strike and form. Perhaps the most telling finds of all are the so-called instructional diagrams. At a workshop in Anatolia, researchers uncovered a flat stone slab near the furnace base. Carved into its surface was a series of concentric circles and straight lines, a schematic that perfectly matched the layout of the clay tires, the essential air pipes that fed the furnace fire. This was not art, it was a technical blueprint. A master smith could use this etched stone to visually explain the critical alignment of the airflow system to a student, demonstrating the relationship between the placement of the pipes and the intensity of the heat within. This simple diagram represents a monumental leap in human cognition, the translation of a complex, invisible process like combustion into a visible, permanent plan that could be studied and understood. It marks the moment when metallurgy moved beyond secret, tacit knowledge into a teachable science. This formalized apprenticeship was the engine of cumulative progress. A master might possess a lifetime of hard-won insights, but without a system to pass it on, those secrets died with him. By training the next generation, a master ensured that his discoveries, his refined furnace designs, and his unique alloy recipes became a foundation upon which his students could build. An apprentice would learn the master's entire repertoire, and in time would inevitably improve upon it, perhaps by adjusting the angle of a hammer strike or by experimenting with a new clay mixture for the crucible. Each generation stood on the shoulders of the one before, not through a vague cultural osmosis, but through the direct, deliberate, and painstaking transfer of skill from teacher to student. This was the true cradle of innovation, a quiet, continuous conversation across centuries, held in the sacred space of the workshop and written in the imperfect, hopeful marks of the apprentice. High in the rugged Zagros Mountains, a workshop was carved not from convenience but from sheer necessity. The thin air and constant howling winds of this high-altitude forge created a world apart, a laboratory of innovation shaped by its extreme isolation. Here, metalworkers faced a fundamental challenge. The intense, sustained heat required to smelt metal was difficult to achieve with traditional bellows in the oxygen-poor environment. Their brilliant solution was not to fight the mountain, but to partner with it. They designed a completely unique furnace, one that harnessed the relentless wind as its primary force. These wind draft furnaces were built with long, angled clay channels that acted like natural air intakes, funneling the powerful gusts directly into the fire chamber. It was a masterclass in local adaptation, turning an environmental hardship into a powerful technological advantage, a design unseen in the sheltered, still air of the lowland valleys. The artifacts born from this windy forge tell a story of profound cultural independence. The tools and ornaments recovered from the site possess a distinct, local aesthetic, their shapes and decorative motifs showing no clear influence from the major cultural centers in Mesopotamia or Anatolia. This was not a remote outpost copying the styles of a more advanced core region. This was a self-contained world, developing its own artistic language and technical traditions in parallel. The Highland Forge of Zagros stands as a powerful testament to a world of many possible futures. It proves that the journey into the Metal Age was not a single, paved road leading from one point of origin, but a sprawling network of isolated trails, each one blazed by a community solving the puzzle of metal with the specific tools their environment provided. This remarkable diversity of invention forces us to look closer at the very substance that started it all, the raw ores that offered both infinite promise and frustrating limitation. The true palette of the ancient smith was far richer than just copper and tin. While we often focus on the classic bronze that defined an age, the workshop floors reveal a history of daring experimentation with more dangerous and unpredictable elements. These early innovators were not just following a recipe, they were actively testing the limits of their world, mixing copper with a host of other minerals to see what new properties they could unlock. Arsenic, for instance, was a frequent, if treacherous, partner. When added to copper, it created a silvery, brilliantly hard alloy that was far superior to pure copper for tools and weapons. The smiths had discovered, likely through repeated trial and error, that this particular mixture yielded a metal that could take a sharper edge and hold it longer. They were creating a superior product, completely unaware of the invisible cost. The process of heating arsenic-rich ores releases a toxic vapor, an unseen danger in the smoky air of the workshop. We can only speculate about the health challenges these artisans faced, experiencing unexplained illness or other physical hardships that they would have attributed to spirits or bad luck. This hidden toll may be one reason why, despite its technical advantages, arsenic bronze was often a temporary solution, a technology that some communities eventually moved away from, perhaps seeking safer, if slightly less effective, alternatives. They were navigating a complex landscape of trade-offs between performance and well-being long before they understood the chemistry behind it. But arsenic was not the only alternative. In other regions, smiths experimented with lead to create a heavier, more malleable metal for specific ceremonial objects or weights. Others explored antimony to produce a harder, more brittle alloy with a distinctive silvery appearance. Each of these experimental paths represents a different possible future for metallurgy, a fork in the road that was actively explored. The eventual widespread adoption of tin bronze was not an inevitable destiny. It was the result of a long, messy process of elimination, where the relative safety, reliable supply, and consistent results of tin ultimately made it the most sustainable choice for many cultures. This exploration of material diversity forces us to see these ancient workshops not as simple factories, but as the first chemistry labs where the periodic table was being tested one dangerous, exhilarating experiment at a time. This relentless drive to find the perfect metal, however, introduced a new and monumental challenge, one of logistics and distance. The sheer volume of resources needed to feed a single furnace reveals an operation of staggering complexity. Forget the lone genius tinkering in a cave. The reality was a meticulously orchestrated supply chain that stretched from deep underground to the heart of the forest. It began with the prospector, an individual with an almost supernatural knowledge of the land. His eyes scanned for the faintest green stain on a rock face or a particular type of discolored soil, signs pointing to a vein of copper ore hidden below. Then came the miners, working in cramped, dangerous tunnels with little more than fire-hardened wooden picks and stone hammers. Their task was back-breaking and slow, prying loose enough raw material to justify the immense effort to come. This raw ore, heavy and unpromising, then had to be moved. In some cases, this meant a short journey from a nearby hillside. In others, it involved a trek of dozens of miles, carried by people or pack animals along routes that became the lifelines of this new industry. The true fuel of this revolution, however, was not the ore itself but the charcoal. A single smelt could consume the carefully managed product of an entire acre of forest. The charcoal burners were masters of a slow, smoldering art, building precise stacks of wood, covering them with earth, and controlling the burn for days to transform solid timber into the pure carbon essential for achieving metal melting temperatures. This was not a casual gathering of firewood. It was a dedicated, large-scale harvesting operation that required careful planning to avoid depleting the local environment. All of these separate streams of labor, the mining, the transport, the charcoal production, had to converge with perfect timing at the workshop. The master smith did not just command the fire, he was the project manager coordinating this entire flow of materials and people. The smelt itself was a multi-day marathon. The furnace had to be preheated, the ore and charcoal layered in a specific sequence, and the airflow maintained for long, exhausting hours. The team took shifts, constantly feeding the fire and watching for the subtle color changes in the smoke that signaled the progress of the chemical reaction within. This was not a guaranteed success. It was a high-stakes gamble where weeks of collective labor could be lost in an instant if the temperature faltered or the furnace lining cracked. Seeing this full picture transforms our understanding completely. The workshop was not just a technical site, it was the bustling, noisy heart of a sophisticated economic operation. It required the coordinated effort of an entire community, from the scout in the mountains to the apprentice pumping the bellows, all united in the ambitious, grueling, and ultimately transformative work of bringing metal to life. This global conversation of fire and ingenuity was not confined to one hemisphere. While societies across Europe and Asia were forging their own paths with copper and bronze, an entirely separate story of discovery was unfolding across the Atlantic Ocean. In the majestic peaks of the Andes, master artisans developed a breathtaking tradition of working with gold, silver, and copper, achieving a level of artistry that would rival any found in the ancient Old World. Their journey began with the same fundamental problem: how to transform a raw, metallic stone into a work of beauty and power, yet their solutions were uniquely their own. Without the high-temperature furnaces common in the Near East, Andean metalworkers perfected the lost wax casting technique with astonishing skill. They would sculpt a detailed figure in beeswax, encase it in clay, and then fire the mold, melting the wax away and leaving a perfect cavity to be filled with molten metal. The results were objects of stunning complexity, like the intricate golden pendants depicting deities with elaborate headdresses. each link and curve a testament to a deeply sophisticated and independent understanding of metals behavior. Meanwhile, in the Great Lakes region of North America, another distinct pathway emerged. For thousands of years, indigenous peoples quarried and cold-hammered vast deposits of pure native copper. They did not smelt the metal, but instead treated it like a special kind of stone, painstakingly heating and hammering it into tools, weapons, and ceremonial objects. This was a technology born from a different relationship with the material, one that valued its natural state and focused on masterful shaping rather than chemical transformation. The parallels are what make the differences so profound. Cultures separated by immense oceans all recognize the unique potential of metallic materials. They all faced the universal challenges of achieving sufficient heat and manipulating a stubborn substance, but their environmental contexts and cultural priorities led them down divergent technological roads. The Old World's pursuit of utilitarian bronze for tools and weapons stands in stark contrast to the Andes, where the initial drive was often for the creation of magnificent ritual and status objects from precious metals. This is not a story of one culture being ahead or behind another. It is a demonstration of polygenesis, the powerful idea that the same great discovery can be born multiple times in human history, each birth shaped by the landscape and the spirit of the people who nurtured it. The workshop fires were lit not from a single torch, but from many sparks scattered across the globe, each one a brilliant, independent answer to the same ancient call of innovation. This entire journey through the ancient workshop forces us to abandon one of our most comforting stories about progress. We have long pictured technology as a ladder, a single, linear climb from simple stone tools at the bottom to complex machines at the top, with each new rung representing an inevitable step upward. But the evidence from the forge tells a very different tale, one where that ladder never existed. A more truthful metaphor is that of a great braided river delta. Countless streams of innovation flow independently, sometimes running parallel for generations. Occasionally, two streams merge, their combined knowledge creating a powerful new current. But just as often, a promising tributary simply dries up, its techniques forgotten for centuries, only to be rediscovered and reinvented far downstream by another culture that had no idea it was retracing old steps. Consider the remarkable case of a technique called Sire Perdue, or lost wax casting. We find exquisite bronze artifacts created using this complex method in the ancient Indus Valley, a technological peak that suggests a deep, sustained mastery. Then, for reasons lost to time, the knowledge of how to perform this casting vanishes completely from the archaeological record in that region. The stream of that particular skill goes dry. Centuries later, and thousands of miles away, master metalworkers in West Africa independently developed the exact same sophisticated process to create their famous bronze sculptures. The technique was not lost to humanity, it was merely dormant in one place, waiting to be reborn in another. This is not a ladder, it is a web of ingenuity, resilient and constantly rewiring itself. This model embraces the messy reality of how innovation truly works, a process full of dead ends, rediscoveries, and chance encounters. A local source of tin ore could be exhausted, forcing a community to abandon bronze for generations. A period of social upheaval could disrupt the master-apprentice chain, causing an entire library of technical knowledge to vanish in a single generation. The story of technology is not one of relentless, predetermined ascent. It is a fragile, human story of brilliant flashes in the dark, of knowledge painstakingly gathered and then tragically scattered, only to be patiently gathered once more. This poignant reality forces us to confront the profound fragility of ancient knowledge. For every technique that flourished into a lasting tradition, countless others flickered out, vanishing from the human story for centuries. The archaeological record is a gallery of these ghost technologies, brilliant ideas that reached a dead end. One of the most striking examples comes from a small collection of artifacts found in the Middle East, dating back over 3,000 years. Scientific analysis revealed they were made from a high-nickel alloy, a sophisticated blend of metals that would have required immense skill and a deep, intuitive understanding of material properties to produce. These objects represent a technological peak, a moment where metalworkers had seemingly unlocked a secret for creating an exceptionally strong and corrosion-resistant material. And then the trail goes cold. That specific alloy recipe, that particular method of combining and working the metals, simply disappears from the record. It is not found again in that region for over 1,000 years. It was not improved upon, it was not passed down, it was lost. The knowledge died, likely within a single generation, leaving behind only these cryptic metal ghosts as proof it ever existed. How could something so advanced be so completely forgotten? The answer lies in the very nature of how this knowledge was held. In a world without widespread literacy, technical expertise was not stored in books or databases. It lived as a living library in the minds and hands of a very few individuals. It was passed from master to apprentice through years of careful, verbal instruction and embodied practice. A master smith carried a lifetime of accumulated wisdom, the precise feel of the correct temperature, the exact sound of the bellows that signaled a successful smelt, the secret recipe for a clay mold that would not crack. This entire universe of understanding was vulnerable, tethered to the health and continuity of a tiny, specialized community. A single period of conflict, a drought that forced a population to disperse, or an illness that swept through a workshop could sever that delicate chain of transmission forever. The loss was absolute when the last person who knew the chance for a specific furnace, or who could identify the right ore for that high nickel alloy, passed from the world, that chapter of technology closed. It was not a step backward on a ladder, it was the extinguishing of a unique light. This adds a deeply human layer of poignancy to our story. It reminds us that the forward march of technology is not a law of nature. It is a fragile cultural achievement, a flickering torch passed carefully from one generation to the next, a legacy that could be, and often was, dropped in the dark. The ghost of a workshop can now be rebuilt from the ground up, not with clay and stone, but with light and data. This is the power of digital reconstruction, a new frontier where lasers and virtual reality are breathing life back into these ancient spaces. Archaeologists are no longer limited to studying static remains. They can now step inside a fully recreated workshop and experience its flow and function firsthand. Using high-resolution 3D scanning technology, every surviving fragment of a furnace, every worn patch of floor, and every discarded tool can be captured in perfect detail. These millions of data points are then woven together into a complete, three-dimensional model that can be explored from any angle. A researcher can put on a virtual reality headset and stand in the very center of a forge that has been silent for 4,000 years. They can watch as digital avatars of the smith and their apprentices go through the motions of a smelt, testing different theories about who stood where and how they passed materials to one another. This allows them to answer questions about social interaction and workflow that were previously pure speculation. Was the apprentice positioned to shield the master from the worst of the heat? Did the layout of the anvils encourage a collaborative or an isolated work style? Virtual reality turns abstract hypotheses into testable, almost tangible experiences. Beyond the social dynamics, computer simulations are now probing the very physics of the ancient furnace. Sophisticated software can model the complex dance of heat and airflow within a digital replica of a clay furnace. Researchers can input variables like fuel type, air intake volume, and the specific geometry of the air vents. The simulation then calculates how the temperature would have risen and fallen, revealing hotspots and cold zones that would have been invisible to the original smith. This digital experimentation is safe, repeatable, and reveals insights that physical experimentation on a fragile, priceless ruin never could. It allows scientists to ask what if. What if they angled the tire pipe just 5 degrees more? What if they used a different clay mixture for the lining? The simulation provides the answer, showing how that small change would have dramatically altered the furnace's efficiency. These digital tools are not replacing traditional archaeology, they are amplifying it. They are becoming an essential part of the modern archaeometallurgist's toolkit, offering a dynamic new way to not just analyze, but to truly understand and experience these ancient centers of innovation, allowing us to walk in the soot-covered footsteps of the first masters of metal. Every new scrape of the trowel carries a profound weight of responsibility. The thrill of uncovering a 4,000-year-old furnace is immediately shadowed by the reality that the act of discovery is also an act of destruction. Once a layer of soil is removed, its original context is gone forever. This is why modern archaeology has shifted from a treasure hunt to a meticulous science of preservation, where the slow, painstaking process of documentation is as vital as the find itself. Every speck of charcoal, every tiny flake of debitage, is mapped in 3 dimensions before it is ever moved. Its exact position relative to a furnace wall or a post hole can reveal whether it was part of the main operation or a later repair, turning a pile of rubble into a readable story of daily life. This glacial pace is not a lack of progress. It is the deepest form of respect for the past, ensuring that the story we piece together is as complete and accurate as possible. This ethical framework extends far beyond the trench. Today, archaeologists recognize that a workshop site is not just a scientific dataset, it is often part of a living cultural landscape. There is a growing duty to involve local communities and indigenous groups from the very beginning. Their deep ancestral knowledge of the land can offer insights no satellite image can provide, pointing researchers toward a forgotten spring that would have been essential for the smith's work, or sharing oral histories that speak of the people of the fire. This collaboration transforms the dig from an external extraction into a shared project of rediscovery, ensuring that the narrative woven from the findings reflects the true, multifaceted legacy of the place. Perhaps the greatest challenge arrives after the excitement of the excavation fades. A fully exposed workshop is heartbreakingly vulnerable. Left open, it can be looted for saleable artifacts within a single night, its priceless context shattered for a quick profit on the illicit antiquities market. Or it can be slowly erased by the elements, its fragile clay walls dissolving under rain and wind. The decision to rebury a site for its own protection is a common and difficult one, a humbling act of admitting that our ability to preserve it in the present is limited, so we must shield it for the future. This entire approach is a form of cultural stewardship, a promise that we are not merely taking from the past for our own enlightenment. We are temporary guardians, holding these fragile windows open for a brief moment, carefully recording what we see, and then ensuring they are sealed and protected, so that future generations with even better tools and deeper understanding can open them once more and learn their own new chapters of the human story. The old story of a single bright spark spreading its light is gone, replaced by a brilliant constellation. Each point of light in this new map represents a community, a workshop, a moment of independent discovery, all shining at once across the ancient world. This is not a timeline, but a living web of innovation, a tapestry woven from countless local threads. The stubborn clay of a particular valley shaped a furnace design that would have been useless in a windy mountain forge. The spiritual beliefs of a culture dictated the rituals that surrounded the transformative fire, guiding which technological paths were acceptable to explore. And the fragile chain of master and apprentice meant that a brilliant alloy recipe could flicker out in a single generation, a ghost technology lost for 1,000 years before being rediscovered continents away. This synthesized view reveals a profound truth about our shared human past. Our ancestors were not passive recipients of a preordained technological destiny. They were active, creative problem solvers, engaged in a deep and continuous dialogue with their immediate world. Their ingenuity was not a single flame passed from hand to hand, but a series of fires lit independently, each one burning with its own unique fuel and purpose. The journey to master metal was as diverse, as creative, and as beautifully unpredictable as humanity itself. These scattered workshop floors have given us far more than new facts. They offer a new way of seeing our shared human story, a lens that transforms a timeline of progress into a vibrant landscape of human creativity. We now understand that the path to the Metal Age was never a single road, but a vast, interconnected web of brilliant minds, each wrestling with the same elemental puzzle in their own corner of the world. This redrawn map does more than rewrite chapters in a history book. It challenges our deepest assumptions about innovation itself, revealing it not as a predetermined climb, but as a collective, resilient, and wonderfully unpredictable endeavor. It is a story of countless small fires lit in the dark, each one a testament to the universal human drive to understand and reshape the world. The next discovery that changes everything might be waiting just beneath the surface, in a forgotten field or a quiet valley, reminding us that history is always being written, one careful discovery at a time. If this journey into the forges of the past has sparked your curiosity, we would love to hear your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more explorations into the deep mysteries that shape our